buenos días, les damos una cordial bienvenida. En pocos minutos iniciaremos
Good
el
morning,
webinar.
everybody. We will begin
Les
with the
invitamos a
webinar in a few
verificar
minutes,
su
and we
audio
will we
mientras
would like you to
se
verify your
conectan los
audio while
participantes.
the other participants
Seleccionar
log
el
into the
canal de
meeting and select the
interpretación
channel
de
of
su
interpretation
preferencia,
that you
español, inglés
uh,
y portugués, porque
prefer, the
tenemos
language that you prefer,
ponentes
because
de
we have
diferentes
presenters
países.
from different countries.
Escriban sus
And
preguntas y
please
consultas
write
a
down your
través del módulo de
questions in
preguntas y respuestas
the
que encuentran en la parte inferior
Q&A chat
de la
box in
plataforma de
the
Zoom.
Zoom toolbar.
Y en el
And
momento del foro
when
se les habilitará el
the activity will
micrófono. Por
start,
favor, estén
the
pendientes
microphone will be
de
enabled.
esto durante
So please
el
pay attention to
transcurso
this
de este webinar
during
para que
this
puedan tener
webinar
sus
so that you
consultas a
can
punto.
uh, make your
Estamos
questions.
viendo que ya estamos conectados la
We,
mayoría
most of us are in the
e
meeting now,
iniciamos.
and we will begin.
Cuando la sostenibilidad se
When
comunica con evidencia,
sustainability
deja de ser
communicates
una
with
promesa y
evidence,
se
it's
convierte
not
en
a
una
promise
confianza
anymore, and it
pública.
becomes public
Muy buenos
trust.
días a todos y
Good morning,
todas
everybody.
que están conectados en este momento.
That
Reciban
is
una
in
cordial
this meeting right
bienvenida al
now.
webinar
Please be welcome
regional
to the regional
Sostenibilidad que
webinar,
genera confianza, el valor
Sustainability
de la
that Builds
información
Trust, the
ambiental y
value of
social confiable
environmental and social
para la toma de
information for
decisiones de
decision
gobiernos, empresas
making
y
by
consumidores.
governments,
Hoy
businesses,
nos
and
convoca
consumers.
una pregunta
Today,
esencial
we
para
are
el
here
presente y el
for because
futuro
of
de
a
nuestros
question that we have
mercados.
for the present
¿Cómo
and the future of our
distinguir una
markets. How
declaración
can we
ambiental seria,
differentiate
verificable y
between an
comprobable de
environmental
una
declaration, which is
afirmación que
serious,
solo
from
suena
just a
sostenible?
statement that sounds sustainable?
Este encuentro es
This
impulsado por la
meeting is
Alianza
promoted by the
Ambiental América
Alliance for
y
the
la
Americas
cooperación
for the Environment
interamericana de
and
acreditación
IAAC,
IAAC, con el apoyo del
with
Instituto
the
Nacional de
support of
Metrología de
the
Alemania, PTD,
metrology
y
with
el Programa
PTB
de las Naciones
and
Unidas
the
para el
United
Medio
Nations Program
Ambiente,
for the
y
Environment
también el proyecto
and
Eco
the
Advance de
project Eco
GIZ.
Advance
Durante los
from
próximos minutos
GIZ.
reuniremos
In the next
voces de
minutes, we will
gobierno,
have
industria,
voices
consumidores
from
y
government,
expertos en
industry,
infraestructura de
consumers,
la
experts from
calidad
the
para
quality
abordar
infrastructure
este tema.
for talking about this
Para
topic.
iniciar,
In order to
invitamos a
begin, we
Warren
will
Merkel. Él
invite
es
Warren Merkel. He
vicepresidente de
is
la
the vice
Cooperación
chair of
Interamericana de
the Inter-American
Acreditación,
Cooperation for Accreditation,
IAAC,
IAC,
que cuenta con una
and
reconocida trayectoria en
he
política pública
has a
internacional de
trajectory
acreditación y ha
in
contribuido al
accreditation and
fortalecimiento
has
de esta
contributed
cooperación
for
regional.
strengthening this
Warren, por
regional
favor,
cooperation. Warren, the
adelante.
floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Veronica. And on behalf of the chair of the Inter-American Accreditation Cooperation, Ms. Andrea Mello, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this event focused on a topic that is so important to our region. Environmental claims and information are taking on an ever-expanding role for consumers, businesses, and governments. As needs and policies evolve, the ultimate end use of information may not always be clear at the time that it is collected. Information intended to support claims to inform consumer choice may also become part of a company's overall assessment of its environmental impact or be included in calculations affecting regulatory programs. In all cases, regardless of the use, it is imperative that decision makers have the appropriate level of confidence in the origin and validity of that information. That is where the quality infrastructure is a critical part of the equation. Establishing appropriate standards, determining conformity based on traceable measurements, and demonstrating competence have been critical to supporting a range of sectors, including sustainability. But often stakeholders are unaware of the existing infrastructure or not utilizing it to its full potential. That is why exchanges like today's session are so critical, sharing experiences and challenges across our region with experts from government, industry, and consumer groups. I wish to sincerely thank the partner organizations that have contributed to organizing this event and to the extremely impressive collection of speakers you are about to hear. I really am excited for the dialogue and confident you will see value in participation today. Once again, welcome, and let's get started. Veronica, back to you.
Muchísimas gracias, Warren, por esta
Thank
apertura que nos
you,
recuerda que la
Warren.
sostenibilidad
This reminds us
necesita
that
una base técnica
sustainability
sólida
needs
para
a technical
convertirse en
basis
confianza de
for
mercado.
becoming
Ahora
a
queremos
trust in
escuchar en
markets.
nuestra
Now
audiencia.
we want
Les
to
invitamos a
listen to our
participar en una
audience.
breve
We will invite you to participate in the survey in Zoom, a short survey. You will get a screen, a pop-up screen, where you will have the question that will be evaluated if a product is really sustainable or not, and what information you trust more for determining this. So the persons who are in the meeting, could you check your screens and look for the question on a pop-up window and answer it in which information do you trust more? When you assess a product or its sustainability, what information do you trust more for assessing this? The information that's provided by the company, an independent certification or seal, or recommendations from other consumers. So these answers are important so that the presenters have a reference of what the participants are looking for answering their questions. We are waiting for you to answer the question, and we will be checking. Please let me know how we're doing with the answers.
En este momento vamos en un 70%.
70% right now. Your answers, as I said, are going to be the starting point for today's conversation because trust is not understood in the same way from all sectors. That's why we need to discuss the topic, evidence and mechanisms in common that we are going to discuss in this webinar. What the audience just answered shows the heart of the problem. When the environmental information is not clear, the trust is fragmented. So we are waiting for the answers. Very well. We have the information that's provided by the company. We have 7% of participants chose this, an independent certification or seal with 81%. This is the answer that has been chosen the most. And as a last one, the recommendations from other consumers is 12%. So I hope that our panelists can see this result and continue with a more clear idea for your presentations. And with this, we will now begin with the first panel. What is the question asking? What is the need or the problem in the region? The conversation will be moderated by Lucia Guillen. She's a consultant from the environmental program of the UN, and she works in eco labeling and information for consumers and sustainable production. Her perspective gives us a regional opinion on how to differentiate products and sustainable solutions. With her, we have three key voices. Diego Vestidas Palmeño, from the perspective of government, he's the Director of Promotions of Projects of Energy Efficiency of the Ministry of the Environment and Energy in Ecuador. He's an agro-industrial engineer and food engineer, and has a master's degree in bioeconomy and sustainability. We have Silvia Chavez from the industry. She's the founder of the Florex Group in Costa Rica, and she's a reference for sustainability applied to the productive sector and in products with environmental approach and transparent communication for consumers. And with us, we also have Lucio Vicente. from the consumer's perspective. He's the general director of the Acatu Institute in Brazil. He's a social communicator with experience in marketing and consumer relations with the consumer. And so sustainability, institutions, and his work promotes um, informed decision making. With this presentation, we will give the floor to Lucia. Thank you for being here in this panel, and we will give, and she will be in charge of the moderation.
Muchas gracias, Verónica.
Thank you,
Bienvenidos,
Veronica. Welcome,
Lucio, Silvia y
Lucio,
Diego,
Silvia, and
a este
Diego
primer panel. Muchas
in
gracias por
this
acompañarnos también.
panel, and thank you for being here with
Bueno,
us.
quiero empezar comentando
I
que
would like
este
to begin
primer panel
saying
va a
that
ser
this first
realmente
panel is
un
going to
panel más
be
como conversatorio para que
a
las personas
discussion
que nos están
so that the
escuchando
persons who
pues
are listening to
puedan
us can
quizás entender un poquito
maybe
más la mirada
understand a
de
little
estas
bit
tres
more the
perspectivas
perspective
que definitivamente cada
of
una
these
tiene sus aristas, pero
three
también puntos de comunión.
presenters, and
Entonces, creo que fue muy
there's many points in
interesante
common between
la
the
pregunta
persons who are
interactiva, ¿no?
here, and the
Que
interactive question was interesting
que todo el mundo finalmente aquí en este panel
because
somos consumidores
we are all
y desde
consumers in
una
this panel, and
perspectiva
from a
de consumidor
consumer
justamente podemos
perspective, we
decir
can
en qué confiamos más, ¿no?
decide what we trust the
Entonces,
most.
para
So,
empezar, le voy
for
a dar la palabra primero a
beginning, I
Diego
will give the floor first
y
to
vamos a
Diego,
hablar
and
sobre,
we will talk
desde
about
la perspectiva de gobierno,
the government
cuáles cree Diego
perspective.
que son los
Which do you
principales
think, Diego,
desafíos
are the
para
main
asegurar que las
challenges
declaraciones y
for
los sellos
making sure
ambientales
that the statements and
utilizados en
the
el mercado
environmental
sean
seals
claros,
used in the
sean
market are clear,
confiables y
that
que
we can
no
trust
induzcan al
them,
error?
and that they don't generate mistakes or error?
Genial. Muy buenos días con todas y todos. Primero que nada,
Good
agradecer en este
morning,
caso a los
everybody. I would like
organizadores
to
la
thank the
preparación de este
organizers,
evento del webinar
the
que buscará
preparation of this event and
justamente hablar
this
de
webinar, and
temas de
it's fundamental
sostenibilidad
to
y más
discuss
que nada cuando
sustainability,
hablamos a nivel regional.
and especially when we speak at the
Consideramos que
regional level.
básicamente
We
los
think that
países que formamos
basically
parte de esta
the
región
countries that are a part of
compartimos
this
muchas
region,
cosas en
we
común
share
y
many
mucho de
things
lo que
in
pasa en cada uno
common,
de nosotros se
and
replica.
many things that
Respecto,
happen
por otro
in one
lado,
country are
temas de
replicated in
seguridad,
another one.
hablando
And
también, por ejemplo, qué pasa en el tema de Ecuador,
talking about
desde la perspectiva, por ejemplo,
Ecuador
del
from
Ministerio de Ambiente y
the
Energía de Ecuador y
perspective of
respecto
the
a la
Ministry
Comisión
of the
Europea,
Environment and
vemos
Energy in
que
Ecuador,
realmente hay un desafío en
there
el
is a
pasar de un mercado
challenge
donde
from
existen
going
múltiples
to
mensajes ambientales
a
que
market where
contribuyen
there's
a la
several
información ambiental de
environmental
manera real
messages to a system
y
where
comparable y
environmental
verificable.
information is
Normalmente
verifiable.
ahora en los mercados
Normally,
del
in the
consumidor,
markets,
muchas veces lo vamos
the
a escuchar especialmente el
consumers
verde, el
will
ecológico, el
hear the
sostenible.
ecological
Algunos de
expression,
estos que se encuentran
sustainable,
dentro de este rubro
green, friendly with the
simplemente
environment. But the problem
las
is not
empresas
so
comunican sus
much that
esfuerzos ambientales,
the
sino
countries communicate
principalmente
their environmental
promover
efforts.
realmente
We
los
want
mismos. El desafío
to
también
promote
aparece
their
cuando las
actions,
afirmaciones
and the challenges.
no explican al consumidor qué es lo que se está midiendo, es decir,
So
cuál es el
the
alcance que tiene esta
many
afirmación,
times
qué
they don't
metodologías
explain
se están
the
utilizando,
consumer the
cómo se
methodology
evalúa
that they're
esta
using,
información.
who verified this
Entonces, dentro de este
information.
parámetro, realmente te
So
diría que yo verificaría como que uno de los
I
desafíos fuertes que
would
tenemos es el hecho
identify
de la
5
regulación,
important
mucho
challenges
más
in the
aún
region,
considerando de que, como sabemos,
especially
una de las limitantes es que la mayor
since one of the
cantidad
limitations
de
as countries
empresas
is that
realmente son
most
MIPIMES.
companies
Entonces,
are
primero,
SMEs.
el desafío, el tema de la difusión de los
So
criterios de
the challenge
mensajes.
of dispersion
Es
and
decir, que
criteria for
sabemos
messages
que
is
esto se
a
va a
challenge.
transmitir
We know that
inclusive a
in each
nivel regional, a nivel de
country at
todo
the
el mundo en sí. Tenemos
regional level,
diferentes
and even in the world, we have
certificaciones, hay metodologías,
different
hay
certifications,
reglamentaciones, ¿no?
methodologies,
Pero para una empresa,
but
especialmente
for
una
a
MIPYME, es un
specific
desafío
company, especially an SME,
identificar cuál es el
it's
instrumento
a
más adecuado.
challenge to
Y
find
para
the
una
most
persona
adequate
consumidora
instrument. And for
también
a
es
consumer
difícil
too,
entender qué
it's hard
significa
to
cada uno de
understand
estos
what
sellos. Y
each
de
one
ahí
of
que
these
viene justamente
seals
el rol
mean.
importante desde las
And
instituciones públicas, de los reguladores, de cómo
and
llevan
there
este
we have the
mensaje,
important role of
tanto a
public
nivel de empresas, pero
institutions
principalmente también
and
al consumidor.
companies
El
and
otro
consumers.
desafío es
So the
realmente
other
ver el
challenge that
tema
I
de la
see
capacidad técnica que
is the technical capacity that we have for measuring or for proving an environmental performance in a company, because we know that a statement has to be backed by information, but we know that many companies that are SMEs need to strengthen their capabilities to be able to measure their environmental impact and manage data and use methodologies and have access to these evaluation processes or verification. So this technical capability for measuring and for proving the environmental performance through information is a challenge too that we need to work on from in the public area. Then in verification and traceability, it's uh, it's not enough to make a statement. There needs to be evidence that can prove it, and this implicates working on clear methodologies. We need having documented information. This is fundamental, and also independent evaluation and verification. And other aspects I was looking at is regarding communication. Basically, the information has to be correct and it has to be complete. So if the information that we provide to the consumer is not complete, it's a problem. It's not going to be the same thing for us to say that a product has a smaller carbon footprint than saying that the whole product is sustainable. So finally, I would say that the challenge is to generate the trust between the institutional part and the market. Trust will be built when we have clear rules and when we use them transparently. In our case, from our experience in the program here in Ecuador, we promote certifications, and this left us a lesson. The program was created for quantifying carbon neutrality and with a system of emissions compensations with technical standards. And it was clear that this environmental seal needs to have credibility. There has to be uh, credibility for the certifications. That's why it's a challenge for us as a country, not creating more seals, but the challenge for us from the state institutions is to build a system that is more coherent, where we have environment statements, where they are backed by technical criteria, and where persons can distinguish between what is uh, publicity and real
Gracias, Leo.
statements.
Qué
Thank
importante
you,
generar esa
Leo. It's
confianza y
important
estas
to generate that
certificaciones
trust and
son
those clear
fundamentales
rules that you were
para
mentioning
poder realmente
for
comunicar mejor a la población y en ese
communicating
sentido quiero darle la
the.
palabra a Lucio
I
también
would like
desde
to give the floor to
el sector
Lucio now,
consumidor. Nos puede quizás también reforzar alguno de esos
the
desafíos,
consumers could
incluir
strengthen
algo
these
más,
challenges.
Lucio,
And
que quizás desde tu
Lucio,
perspectiva
maybe from your
es importante.
perspective, you have important elements.
Bom dia a todos e todas. Quero iniciar minha fala agradecendo pela
I would
oportunidade
like
aos
to
organizadores deste
begin
evento,
thanking
Lucia,
you for the
Diego e Silvia,
opportunity and
estar com
for
vocês
the
aqui.
organizers, Lucia, Diego, and Silvia. It's a pleasure
Ouvi o
to be
Diego
here with
falar e
you.
também
I have been
vendo a
listening
resposta das
to
pessoas que
Diego, what he was
responderam
saying,
sobre a
and
confiança. E a
the
perspectiva que a gente
answers
traz no
of the
Brasil, né,
persons. It
das
has to do with
pessoas
trust
não
and the
pode
perspective,
ser
from the
compartilhada
perspective of
com
what we
outros
have in
países,
Brazil.
é
I
que
think this
o
could
consumidor
be
cada vez mais
shared with
pede que
other countries. The
transparência e
consumer
informação. As
asks
nossas pesquisas
more
têm,
transparency
ao longo de mais de 20
from
anos,
our
temos a
research and
empresa que faz
our
pesquisas há mais de 2 décadas
statements.
no
And so
Brasil,
we are in
onde
an
acreditamos no
organization that
consumidor
has been
e o que a
doing research
gente
for
tem
more than two
visto
decades
é
in
um
Brazil.
crescimento
And what we have
das
seen
informações
is a
ambientais
growth
e um crescimento do
of
greenwashing em produtos nos últimos anos.
the
Então,
information
a
that is
gente tem
provided.
tentado conquistar o
And
consumidor com
companies that have
informações que
tried
não necessariamente
to
são
uh,
verídicas. Então, muito do que
give
é
information to
grande para
consumers that is not
determinados
necessarily
vendedores
true.
também não tem
So much of
rastreabilidade de informação,
what
e isso
is
leva o consumidor a ter
built for
dúvidas sobre
consumers, the information is
a
not traceable. So that's why the
autenticidade,
consumer has
a
questions or doubts
credibilidade
about the
que o produto
authenticity or the
carrega a
credibility
partir
of
de
a product
todo um processo
based
produtivo que
on
foi envolvido.
the productive
Para vocês
process that,
terem ideia,
in
no
which it was
Brasil, uma
involved.
pesquisa lançada no
So
ano
that you have an
passado
idea, in
mostrou
Brazil,
que
a research that was
85%
done
das
last
alegações
year
ambientais
said
em
that
produtos no Brasil
55%
são
of
falsas ou enganosas.
environmental
Então, não
claims
tem muitas vezes
are
informação para
fake
que o
or
consumidor
misleading.
possa
And many times we
verificar
don't have that information so that
está no
consumers
rótulo
can
do produto.
verify this
E
information in
60%
the product.
das
And
pessoas pesquisadas
60%
não
of
confiam nessas
the
alegações
persons who were
ambientais. Então, ao mesmo tempo que a gente vê um crescimento
investigated they, or who
do
were
apelo
asked about this don't
ambiental,
trust the
as
information
pessoas estão
in the products.
gradativamente
And
entendendo
also
que
the
nem tudo que está sendo colocado
persons
no
are
rótulo de produto, na
understanding
embalagem de
gradually that not
produto,
everything
também
that they include
isso
in the
é
label of a
confiável.
product
E outro
is
ponto
we can
importante é
trust.
que falta muita
Another important
padronização
point is
da
that
informação.
uh,
O
we
consumidor, ele
we
reage
need
muito a
standardization of
informações que são
information
mais
for
simples
consumers
e que possam
because
levar, por exemplo, a uma consulta
there's
onde ele
more
possa
reactions with more
verificar determinado
simple
tipo de
information,
informação.
or
Aqui tem um
we could ask
papel
making questions
fundamental
for
das
verifying the
certificações,
information that's
porque
in the
existe
product. That's
um
a
papel
fundamental
também de que a gente
rule
possa
for
facilitar para o
certifications because
consumidor
there's
o
we
entendimento
need
sobre
to
tudo que envolve um
facilitate to
determinado
the
tipo de
consumer this
produto. Então,
understanding
uma certificação ela
of
pode resumir e pode ajudar o
so
consumidor
with
também
a
a
certification,
identificar
the
os
characteristics of
impactos
the
daquele
products are
produto
summarized. It
para as
helps
pessoas no
the
mercado.
consumer to
Ao
identify
mesmo
the
tempo
information
que é
from the
importante que a gente
product,
possa explicar para o consumidor
uh,
quais são, né, quais são os principais
and we can
impactos de um
explain
determinado
the
produto.
consumer which are the
Qual
main
tipo de
impacts of
certificação deve ser a parte a
certain
ser
products, what
feita?
type of
Porque muitas dessas
certifications
alegações são feitas apenas pela
and
própria
third
empresa,
persons who
mas há
are
a necessidade de a gente também ter
involved. And
a credencial de uma outra empresa fazendo essa
so
verificação.
there is a
Existe uma ausência de verificação
we
independente que
need
faz
many
com
times we
que a
need
gente
another company
caia
to carry out
também
these
num outro
verifications.
dado
There's an absence
de
of independent
seguinte informação,
verification.
que
So
grande parte da população
we
no
there's
Brasil,
another
consumidores, com 8% das
something that
pessoas
happens in Brazil with
conhecem
consumers that's impressive.
certificações. Então há uma
Very
necessidade de que a gente possa
little, a small
explicar o que está
percentage of
por trás das
persons actually
certificações para
know
que a
the
gente seja
certification.
uma
So it's
referência
very
em
important
produtos
to
que têm
explain what's
a
behind the
certificação
certification
seja
so
uma
that
referência
they are a
para que
reference.
não seja apenas uma
So the
escolha
products
de
that have a
pagar mais barato
certification,
por um determinado produto. As
this
certificações
is a
têm esse
reference. It's
poder
not only
de
about
fazer com
paying
que o
less for a product, the
consumidor
certifications have the
confiar
power
mais em
for the
determinado tipo de
consumer
escolha que ele
to
precisa fazer.
trust
E facilitar muito a
the
linguagem
what he's
técnica, né?
choosing
A linguagem
and
clara, ou
facilitate the
termos que muitas
technical
vezes são utilizados não
vocabulary and
necessariamente
the terms
indicam
that are used
no
many
repertório do
times.
consumidor
This
um
doesn't
entendimento.
necessarily mean
É,
they don't
o
necessarily
produto é
mean something
biodegradável,
for
o
the
produto, por exemplo,
consumer
tem algum impacto
when
na
they
redução
say
de
it's
emissões, o
biodegradable
produto tem
or if the
impacto
product
ligado ao
is
desenvolvimento.
has
Então,
many
são
characteristics
questões que
or
muitas vezes a gente precisa,
and all
no
this type of
processo
things
de
are
certificação
things that
também,
the
considerar, porque isso leva
consumer
uma complexidade, porque são
might
muitas terminologias,
not understand because they're
siglas que a gente tem que
very
lidar.
complex. There's
E outra
technologies,
coisa também que a
symbols
gente verifica como,
that
como um elemento
consumers
importante
don't
é a
necessarily understand.
veracidade das alegações.
So
Então, quais são os caminhos para buscar a confirmação, a verificação
we need to
desses
find the paths
dados, informação que
for
está ali na embalagem, onde a gente
verifying
pode ter
certain
essa
data and
confiança, essa
information and the
confiança,
statements that are
para que ele
done
possa verificar se a informação é
in
correta.
with the product so that consumers
Passo,
can trust
passo
these
a minha fala
certifications
agora
and
para a
verify
Lúcia.
the information. Now I will give the floor to Lucia.
Gracias, Lucio. Efectivamente,
Thank you,
qué dato para más
Lucio.
potente el que nos das del 55%
55
de etiquetas
percent
que son
of
falsas o
labels that are
engañosas en
fake
Brasil.
or misleading in Brazil. That's
Solamente
very
quería comentar antes
impactful information. And I
darle
would
la
like to
palabra a
say, before
Silvia,
giving the floor
que
to
hace unos
Sylvia,
días también
I would like to say
estuvimos
that some
reunidos
days ago we
con el
met
equipo de sostenibilidad
with
de
the
Amazon
sustainability team from
y
Amazon,
justamente tenían
and they
ese mismo problema por
had
atrás.
that
¿Cómo
problem
puede
to
Amazon
how can
también
Amazon
ser muy claro y
be
transparente con
clear
las
and
certificaciones
transparent
que está
about
aceptando
the
y
certifications that they're
puede poner en
accepting
su plataforma, ¿no?
and that
Entonces,
they can include in
ellos
their
decían
platform? So they were
que
saying
entre
that
12,
between
15,
12,
incluso
15,
números de dos dígitos en adelante,
and
crecen sus ventas cuando ponen
the
un
sales
atributo de
grow
sostenibilidad, pero la
when there's
responsabilidad que
a
conlleva eso es muy grande,
sustainability
¿no? Entonces, al
attribute,
final son las
but the
empresas
responsibility is very large. So
las
at the end of the
que
day, it's the
pues
companies that
ponen estos sellos, estas
give these
declaraciones en sus
seals or
productos
statements
y
to the
quizás
products.
Silvia,
And
que un gusto
maybe
tenerte
Silvia,
aquí,
it's a pleasure to have you
quizás tú eres la que
here.
más
Maybe
experiencia
you
y
are
más, digamos,
the
por así
person that has
decirlo,
the most
en la cancha has
experience
estado desde el lado
in the area of
de la empresa, ¿no? De la empresa productora,
companies of the
que al final
companies
es
that
a la que
produce these products. And at the end of the day,
más bien o mal le reclama tanto el consumidor como el
the
gobierno
consumers
que
and government
utilicen bien estos sellos.
ask for your
Entonces,
sector to use correctly
quería
these
preguntarte también,
for the
o
correct
quizás
use of
puedas
these seals.
comentar
So I would like to ask you,
más que el desafío, ya los
beyond
elementos
the
justamente que generan
challenge,
esta
the elements
confianza
that
y
generate
cómo
this trust,
la empresa
and
busca
how
dar
the
respuesta, ¿no?
companies
A
look
toda
for
esta
answers
solicitud de transparencia,
to these
de generar
requests for transparency
confianza en el
and for
consumidor.
generating trust in consumers.
Sí, bueno, gracias y
Thank
buenos
you.
días todavía desde Costa
Good
Rica.
morning
Estamos
from
empezando.
Costa Rica. Good morning still. We are beginning with
Vamos
our
a ver,
day over here.
comparto
Let's see.
con
I
Lucio
agree
y
with
Diego
Lucio and
todos los
with
desafíos que nos
Diego,
dan.
all the
Ahora,
challenges.
desde la perspectiva
Now,
de la industria,
from the
como
industry's
somos
perspective,
nosotros en Centroamérica y desde la empresa,
in us in Central America,
hay
and
dos elementos,
there's two elements
Lucía, como me preguntas, que tienen una incidencia
that
importante.
have a very important
Si,
impact.
si no avanzamos
If we don't make
en
progress
declaraciones validadas, en sellos,
in
bueno,
validated
en
statements,
certificaciones,
certifications,
incluso con validación de tercera
and
parte,
also third-party
lo que nos está pasando a nosotros
validation
es
or
el
stakeholder
inicio de la
validation, what's
desconfianza.
happening with us, it's the
Hay
beginning
un
of the
mercado,
lack
hay
of trust. There is a
consumidores,
market, there are
compradores de
consumers,
fresas, por ejemplo,
buyers.
nuestros productos de limpieza se dirigen mucho a
Our
empresas para sus
products
propios
are
procesos de
sold to
producción,
many companies.
que en esa
So there's companies
confusión
too. So in that
desconfían.
confusion, they
Y
don't have
entonces, ¿qué pasa
trust.
con
They lose
esto?
trust. And
No
what happens?
compran
They don't
o
buy,
en esa confusión
or in that
aceptan
confusion, they
productos que realmente
accept
no
products
cumplen o
that don't
no están
comply with
pasando por
the
procesos validados.
standards or with validated
Esto
processes.
afecta el mercado para todos,
This
por
affects
bien o
the
para
market
todos.
for everybody.
Ese es un tema.
So that's an issue.
Entonces, las empresas
So the
también
companies
tenemos un elemento que
also
es súper importante
have
en
a
el
very
control
important
real.
element.
Quien trabaja realmente, la empresa que incorpora, no tiene
The
que ser perfecto,
company
Tomás,
that
que
incorporates, they don't have to
incorpora
be perfect, but the one that
acciones, buenas
incorporates
prácticas,
actions, good
elementos
practices,
desde todo
and
el ciclo de
elements
vida de
like
lo que
this
está produciendo,
in the
lo que está
whole cycle
haciendo,
of what they're
incorpora
producing,
y lo comunica
they
debidamente,
incorporate it and they
crece,
communicate it correctly,
se
they grow.
supera. Cómo
They
mejora
become bigger. There's
continuamente.
a continuous
Eso es así.
improvement.
Te lleva a la
That's the way
mejora
it is.
constante,
It
a la
takes you to continuous
innovación, a la
improvement, to
búsqueda
innovation,
constante de
to
mejorar tus productos y
looking
servicios.
for improvement of
¿Qué
products and
pasa con
services.
con este tema
So
cuando
what
no se
happens with
hace
this
correctamente,
when
cuando
it's
no
not
se comunica
done
lo que
correctly, when
realmente
it's not
estás haciendo
communicated or what
o
you're
cuando
actually
se
doing,
comunica
or
adrede
when
con unas acciones de mercadeo, de marketing
or
que
when there's
no son transparentes,
marketing actions
bajas el nivel
that are
y
not
lo bajas el
transparent or
precio. Entonces
non-transparent
lo que provoca es una
communications, the
competencia
level goes
desleal.
down for everybody.
También
So you
están invirtiendo en
generate
innovación,
unlawful
en
competition, and the
buenas
persons who
prácticas,
are
en
investing in
mejorar
innovation, good
y
practices and
en bajar sus
improvements,
impactos
and in lowering
sociales,
their impacts,
ambientales,
social,
y
environmental
no lo
impacts,
hace y simplemente declara.
and
Y esto nos
some
ataca a
others just
todos en el
don't do it
mercado, a
and
todos los
and
mercados.
uh,
El
just
mercado
make
financiero es
statements, and
una
this
potencia
gets
enorme
everybody
para hacer el
behind. The
cambio,
market
pero
has an
sí,
enormous power to
desde
generate
la
change.
perspectiva empresarial,
From the
esto
company
no se pone
perspective, if
serio y no
this
avanzamos,
doesn't
más
become
bien
serious
va
and
a
we don't
haber
make
y no
progress,
retraso.
that is going to
Esos
generate
elementos,
problems. So
entonces,
these elements
básicamente, las
are
empresas tenemos una gran
basically,
responsabilidad,
companies have a great
enorme,
responsibility,
para comunicar lo
enormous
que realmente hacemos.
responsibility to communicate
Eso
what
es
we
obvio.
actually do. That's
Ese es el primer
obvious.
elemento.
So that's the first
Comunicar con
element,
transparencia y
and communicating with
sostener, ¿verdad?
transparency
Para
and
sostener
sustain it.
hay que
And to
llevar
sustain it,
registros, hay que,
we need to
¿verdad?
have
Hay que
registries
llevar
and
indicadores,
we need
etcétera, y
indicators,
poderlo
etc.
mostrar. Eso
And
sube a
we need to be
todos
able to show it. And
y
this
sube
has a
una
positive
competencia
impact
mucho mayor.
for
Pero si no
everybody,
lo
and
hacemos,
it
todos
improves
bajamos
competition.
y
And
todos
if we
nos
don't do it, we
retrasamos.
all go
Esos
down.
son los elementos para mí
So
principales que
these
van
are
de
the
frente
main
con lo que
elements,
dijo Diego y Lucio, que estoy
together
totalmente de
with what
acuerdo.
Diego and Lucio mentioned, because I
Muchas
completely agree
gracias,
with them.
Silvia. Efectivamente,
Thank
sí.
you, Silvia.
Eso que mencionas de ese
What
avance,
you mentioned
de esa
about
mejora
progress,
constante que se
constant
requiere
improvement that is
es
required
urgente, ¿no? Me acuerdo que hace algunos
is
años también
urgent. Some
la
years
mencionabas
ago,
en
I
un
can
panel
remember
que
that you mentioned it
hicimos
in a
hace un
panel
par
that
de
we
años
did
y
some years ago.
efectivamente
And
es un trabajo
yes, it's
arduo, ¿no? Que mucha
hard
gente
work.
está aquí,
It's
estamos
work that
todos involucrados
we are all involved
y
in,
poniendo nuestro
and
granito de arena
we are
cada
all
uno para poder
contributing
realmente
with
pues
it to be
avanzar y
able
generar
to make progress and
este sello
generate
verifiable, ¿no? De
this
esto me
a
voy a
seal
pasar
or
a
a
una
certification that we
siguiente
can trust.
pregunta
I'm going
donde
to go to another
quizás
question
le voy a dar
where
esta vez primero la
I will
palabra
give
a
the
Lucio para
floor
que
to
nos cuente
Lucio now so that he
más
can
bien
tell
entonces
us
desde la perspectiva
from
del
the
consumidor,
perspective of
cuál es la
consumers, which is
responsabilidad del
the
consumidor frente a
responsibility
sus
that
greenwashing.
consumers have
Si bien es
facing
cierto,
greenwashing.
las diferentes,
The
hay
different
diferentes grados de
There's
responsabilidad
different
y
degrees
probablemente
of
la del consumidor
responsibility,
más bien es el
and
que recibe, el
probably
consumidor, ¿no? Pero de alguna forma
the
también tiene responsabilidad.
consumer
Entonces, Lucio, de pronto que nos puedas
has a
comentar
certain
cuál
level of
es la responsabilidad del
responsibility. So,
consumidor.
which do you think are the responsibilities of the consumer, Lucio?
No Brasil, nós temos comentado muito sobre termo
In Brazil, we
chamado
have discussed a great
responsabilidade
deal about a
compartilhada,
term
onde
called the shared
governos,
responsibility,
empresas,
where the government,
consumidores e sociedade civil
companies,
organizada
consumers,
possam
and the
dividir essa
organized
responsabilidade
civilian
e o
society can
consumidor ele faz parte,
divide
né,
these responsibilities, and the consumer is a
dessa
part
fração, dessa parte
of
aonde ele
this
precisa receber informações, mas ao mesmo tempo
part where
ter consciência
where
de
they
que
need to
cada
receive
escolha
information,
que
but
ele
also
faz
be
não
aware
patrocina
that
tudo que está por trás de produto. Todas as
where
escolhas que
what he
foram
chooses
feitas para constituir
supports what's
produto,
behind the
quando a gente
product.
faz a escolha, a gente acaba patrocinando
So
aquilo,
when you choose that
validando
product,
tudo que
we
está
are
por trás.
actually sponsoring that product and
Acredito que como
validating what's
grande
behind that product.
movimento
So what we
ligado a
see
consumidores
as
é
a great
de que
moment that
quando
it links
existe a
to
informação
consumers
e
is that
quando ele constrói
when
valor
we have this information and when we
para fazer
build
escolhas,
value
ele passa a ter,
for
que isso é uma percepção que a gente tem no Brasil,
this
ele passa
purpose,
a ter
this is
uma
a
nova relação com
perspective that we have
determinadas
in or
categorias de
perception that
produto.
we have
Então, não é
in Brazil.
apenas o preço
So
que
there's
leva a fazer uma
the
escolha, mas
relationship
também tem outras
changes with the products. It's not
características.
only about
Então, o
the
papel do
price.
consumidor, ele é
There's
muito de
other features,
receber
and
informação
the
e começar a aplicar essa escolha
consumer receives
antes dele ter
information,
que
and we
hoje
should
já
start
existe, né,
using that information for
diferentes
making
tipos de
our choices.
informação que
Taking into
podem ser
consideration that today we
facilmente
already have different
reconhecidos,
types of
por
information that
exemplo,
can be
frases prontas
easily
para
acknowledged,
segundos
such
de
as
mercado. Por exemplo, É muito comum no Brasil a gente ver uma
It's
frase
very common to see
que
isolated
representa a
phrases
rede do
such
meio ambiente,
as
né?
this
Sem
product
nenhum tipo
is
de
friendly with the
informação que
environment,
leve o consumidor, por
or
exemplo, a
with no
saber o que é
information
aquela
that
frase diz
will
efetivamente.
inform the consumer
O consumidor
about
ele
what
é
this means being
muito
friendly with
carente,
the
né? Ele
environment.
precisa
So the
de informações
consumer
para poder fazer essa comparação. Ao
needs,
mesmo
is
tempo,
lacking this
cada
information, needs this
consumidor tem um
information for making these
grande
comparisons.
potencial
And at the same
de
time, each
engajar
consumer has a
novos
great
consumidores.
potential
As redes
to
sociais trazem um grande
involve
fortalecimento de
or attract
compartilhar uma
new
experiência.
consumers.
Produtos que carregam
Social media
certificações como a
brings us
referência
the
e a
possibility of
credibilidade,
sharing these
empresas que estão
references,
investindo, como a Cia, o
these
favor
products that have
disso, em
traceability,
inovação, elas
certification,
também precisam ser
companies that are doing work on
preferidas
innovation. So they
para
also
que
need
a gente
to
consiga, que o
be
consumidor
preferred by
consiga
consumers so that
fazer com que as
persons
empresas entendam que investir em certificação,
so
investir em
consumers can
comunicação
make companies
correta
understand that investing
é
in
tão
certifications,
lucrativo quanto
communication, correct
fazer
communication
outras
is
escolhas.
as
Então, o
profitable
consumidor ele é um
as
grande
other
patrocinador de tudo
choices.
isso que a gente está
So
fazendo. Agora,
consumers
é
are
muito importante
big
que a gente
sponsors of
saiba
what we are
que
doing,
as empresas de
but
governo
it's
têm um papel
important for us
fundamental
to
de
know that
organização
companies and the
coletiva
government have a
para que essas
fundamental role
informações possam
in the collective
efetivamente
organization
chegar no
so that this
consumidor com
information
a
actually reaches
capacidade dele
consumers.
interpretar. Então, muitas vezes um produto ele
And
carrega
information
informações
that the
muito
consumer can
complexas.
interpot. So
Falando, por exemplo, de
a lot of the
rastreabilidade,
information
que
that
é
is
um
provided is
produto
too complex. When we're talking
importantíssimo
about
para
traceability, it's a
nós que
very
produzimos, a gente
important
defende muito essa
element
ideia
for us.
de que a rastreabilidade ela
And we
é
need
um
to
processo que leva
understand that idea, traceability, which is
condição
a
de
process
poder
that
capturar diferentes atributos em cada
uh,
fase de produção.
takes
Então,
us to
apesar de ser um
a
atributo
situation where we
que ele é
understand the different
básico, deveria
attributes
ser
of each
básico,
phase
ele
of
não
the production. If
necessariamente
it's
está
an
em todos
attribute
os
that is
produtos.
basic or should
Então,
be basic in all
essa
products,
fragilidade que
and it
existe
might not be.
quando a
So
gente
that
compra um produto e não
fragility
sabe de
that
onde ele
we
vem,
have when
carrega
we
diversos
see a
impactos
product and we don't
socioambientais. E o
know where it comes
consumidor,
from,
ele pode
this
ser
have
influenciado
different
para
social
que
and environmental impacts,
investigue mais
and
sobre
consumers
determinado
can be
tipo de
influenced
origem de produto,
to
né? Sabendo a
find out
origem, sabendo
more
como
about the
foi, como
origin
foi
of the
produzido,
product,
você vai
than knowing about the
adicionando
origin, how it was
informações e o
produced.
consumidor se torna
You
muito mais
evolve in terms
receptor
of information,
para
and
poder
consumers
interpretar se aquele
become
produto faz sentido para a vida
or
dele,
have
se aquele
a
produto
larger
ele tem um
repertoire to be able
impacto
to
para aquilo que ele também tem como propósito.
interpret the
Que a gente costuma dizer no
information to see
Brasil
if the product has
que o
a negative
consumidor
impact.
compra
We say
algo
in Brazil that
praticamente constrangido.
a
Ele não quer
consumer will
comprar um
hardly
produto para
buy
saber que aquele
something
produto
to
tem um impacto
feel bad
ambiental,
about
um
it.
problema social.
We buy some.
Então,
Nobody wants
para
to buy
fazer
a
com que
product
esse
to
senso de
feel
responsabilidade
guilty about
fique no
it because
maior
it has
número de mãos que
an
os
environmental
governos e as
problem, for
empresas
example. And for
precisam de uma
example,
organização para que essa
the
informação
decision
chegue ao
is in the hands
consumidor
of
e
companies
ele
and
possa
governments, and they
efetivamente
need
ter mais
to make this
critérios
information
para
reach the
poder fazer a
consumer
sua
so that
escolha.
they have more selection criteria.
Gracias, Lucio. Efectivamente, mencionabas
Thank
dos
you,
cosas
Lucio.
que me
You
parecen súper
mentioned
importantes, la
two things that I
trazabilidad y la
think are very important:
rastreabilidad
traceability
de un
of
eslogan o de un
a
sello.
slogan or a
En realidad
seal.
es
That
responsabilidad,
that's a
claro, del
responsibility, of
consumidor
course, of the
entenderlas.
consumer to understand it.
Y quizás va un poco más
And
relacionado a lo
it
que
might be also
decía
related
Diego hace un
to what
rato.
Diego said a little
¿Cómo
while ago.
sabemos
How do we
qué es
know
biodegradable,
what
qué
is
es
what does
carbono neutral?
biodegradable mean or carbon
También ya hay una
neutral?
responsabilidad
So there is
del
a
consumidor
responsibility
de
of
aprender.
the
Lamentablemente,
consumer for
mucha
learning.
gente que
Unfortunately,
tiene cierta edad para arriba,
many
pues vivió
persons who have
consumiendo
a
muchos recursos
certain
todo ese
age,
tiempo,
uh,
viendo calidad
they
solamente en cuanto
looked at
a
quality only
rapidez de
for during their
crecimiento de lo que
lives,
compra, pero quizás ahora
the
sí ya
functioning of the
toca
product that they
hacer
buy. But today
esa tarea,
we
digamos,
need to
de
carry out
aprender
this
qué
new task of
significa un
learning
análisis cuando hablamos
what
de un
the
sello que
environmental
abarca
analysis
todos los
means or the
puntos del
seals
ciclo de vida de un producto. ¿Y eso qué
mean
es? Obviamente la
when
mayoría
we
de
talk about a
personas no lo
seal that
entiende,
includes
pero
all the
quizás ya
phases
es
of the
el
life
momento
cycle of our products?
de
Maybe we
justamente
don't understand
empezar
that,
a
but maybe
aprender
it's
qué
time to start
significan
understanding what all of
esas
this
declaraciones.
means, these
Cuando hablamos de
statements mean.
amigable,
When
probablemente
we
sí
talk
es
about
una declaración vaga,
friendly,
falsa y pues
it's vague, it could
no la
be
deberíamos usar,
fake, and we shouldn't
pero
use
otras
it.
cosas que
But
sí ya están
other
tomando
things that
tracción y
are
tienen sentido,
getting
probablemente
traction
sí.
and that make
Entonces,
sense, maybe
en
we
ese
should use
sentido,
those. So,
Diego, quería
in that sense,
preguntarte
Diego, I would like to ask
si, ¿cuál
you,
crees que es la responsabilidad del
which do you think is
gobierno
the responsibility of the
frente
government
al greenwashing también?
regarding greenwashing?
Dale, muchas gracias, Lucía. Bueno,
Thank you,
principalmente creo que
Lucia.
la responsabilidad del sector público
The
cuando hablamos de las
responsibility of the
instituciones rectoras
public
es
sector when
fundamental en el combate
we
del greenwashing,
talk about
pero
the
también hay que
responsible
reconocer que
institutions,
es algo que no
we need
podemos
to acknowledge
trabajarlo
that it's
solo
something
desde
that
los estados
we
y como únicos
that
responsables,
it's
sino
something
que
that we cannot work
también
only from the
debemos de esta
governments
manera
as a
trabajarlo
sole
con la
responsible
con las
entity.
empresas
We need
y de
to
hecho
be
pues con el mismo
coordinated with
consumidor.
companies
O
and
sea,
with
la
the
idea
consumers.
justamente es
So the idea
garantizar,
is
digamos, que
precisely
tenemos
to
credibilidad a la
guarantee
información
the
que estamos
credibility of
emitiendo a
information
través de
that we are
ustedes en nuestra
issuing through a
institución y
seal, a
más aún cuando nos
certification,
referimos a
and
esta
especially when
información
we are
ambiental que
referring
hay
to
en el
environmental
respaldo de este
information
producto, este servicio que
that's
está
behind or
bajo
a
esa
product or a
certificación.
service that's under that
Entonces, creo
certification.
que desde el
So I
Estado,
think
en
that's
lo que nos
from
corresponde,
the
es
state.
establecer reglas
What we
claras.
need to do
Las
is to have
empresas
clear rules.
necesitan saber y
Companies need to
conocer
know what is
realmente cuando se
expected
comunica un
from
atributo ambiental, qué
them when they
condiciones
communicate
son las que
an
tienen que
environmental
cumplir para
attribute and
acceder
what
a
conditions they should
determinados
comply with
reconocimientos,
for
esquemas y demás.
accessing certain
La
schemes
otra,
or
creo
acknowledgements
que
or
es
recognitions.
importante que
The
nosotros
other
como
thing
Estado
it's important for us
podamos
as a
desarrollar y
state
promover mucho
to
lo que son los
develop
criterios
and
técnicos
promote
consistentes
technical
con
criteria that are
los
consistent
contenidos
with
y que también estas buenas
standards
prácticas
and good practices
ambientales, buenas prácticas
for the
sostenibles que se
environment and
aplican, por
sustainable good
ejemplo, en el
practices that we
caso de
use
nuestros
in, for
sistemas productivos
example, many
y lo que
productive
viene a ser
systems
en sí muchos procesamientos que,
and
bueno, están en el ámbito económico.
processes
Esto
in
realmente
the
considero que es
economic
importante también
environment.
que se les adapte a
It's
la realidad
also
nacional que tenemos cada uno de los países en la región.
important to give
Desde,
it a
no
priority
solo
at
es el
the
tema de
national
que
level. It's
nosotros
not only
copiemos, digamos,
uh,
modelos internacionales, sino que
about
debemos
us
también
copying
considerar
international
cuál es
models.
la
We need to
estructura
consider
productiva que
which is
tenemos en
the
cada uno de nuestros
productive
países
structure
en la
that we have
región.
in each one of our
Tomemos en
countries in
cuenta,
the
como decía,
region.
que las MIPYMES tienen un peso
The
muy importante
SMEs have a
y donde
very
van a existir
strong
diferentes niveles de
weight
capacidad técnica
where
y también
we
financiera.
have
La
different
otra es que
capabilities at the
debemos
technical and
trabajar
economic
también
level.
como Estado
And
en
the other
un
thing is that as a state,
que
we
es
should work
transparencia
on
cuando hablamos de temas
mechanisms
de
for
información. El
transparency.
tema de la trazabilidad y verificación es
Traceability and
importantísimo
verification
y
is
esto
very
también
important.
muchos países de la
And
región,
many countries in the
digamos,
region,
no tenemos, como en el caso,
we
por
don't
ejemplo, de Ecuador,
uh,
sistemas de trazabilidad ya
have
sumamente
traceability
específicos.
systems
Estamos trabajando en esto y sé
that
que
are
también
specific.
muchos
We are
países
working
lo
on
están
that. And I
trabajando
think many
y
countries
esta
are
es
working
nuestra
on this. And this
responsabilidad
is
como
our
Estado. Entonces,
responsibility as
darle
a state.
credibilidad en un
So
sistema
credibility of
realmente va a
a
aumentar
system is
cuando
going to
el
improve,
sistema o la información que
is
tenemos
going, or
pueda ser
the
revisada y también
information that we have, and
seguir
it will be, we will
procedimientos
be able
sumamente
to
claros para
check it
poder
and have
demostrar
clear
realmente ese cumplimiento.
procedures to prove
Consideramos también que,
compliance.
por ejemplo, la responsabilidad
Also, the
estatal también tiene una
responsibility of
dimensión
the
de
state
fortalecimiento de
has
capacidades,
a
es decir,
dimension that's
tenemos que
related to
trabajar en
strengthening
este caso
capabilities. We
y
need
no
to work
podemos
in this case, and
exigir
we
el
cannot
mismo nivel de
ask
recursos
the
técnicos a
same
una gran
level of
empresa que
technical
a una
resources
micro,
from
¿no?
a large company
Ahí son
to an
importantes los
SME.
mecanismos de
So
acompañamiento que
these
debemos generar las
mechanisms
instituciones del
for
Estado para
support are
garantizar que
important in
todos
state
estamos
institutions to
hablando
guarantee that
bajo las mismas
we
terminologías,
are
bajo las
all
mismas
working with
definiciones
the
y que
same
estamos
definitions,
periódicamente
using the
actualizando
same
los mismos procesos.
terminology, and
Un
using the same
ejemplo claro
processes. An
igual en
example that
Ecuador, por ejemplo, el programa
I
Cero Carbono
can
Cero,
mention from
nosotros
Ecuador
empezamos a
is that
impulsar mucho el fortalecimiento
we
de capacidades, por ejemplo,
promoted
en cuanto a
the
certificaciones,
strengthening of
por supuesto
capabilities
en el
for
sector de la
certifications,
construcción y los
for
otros
example, with
gremios
the
también de los sistemas
construction
productivos,
sector
porque ellos lo que nos
and
decían es,
other
nosotros
sectors of the
reconocemos y
productive system,
necesitamos
because they
desde
would say, we
ustedes,
don't know, and we
de
need
cierta
from
manera, pues,
you to we need from you more information and more support with this information. So I think we have three dimensions as a state. We need to regulate and orient. That's our first dimension. We need to strengthen capabilities, and we need to generate the conditions for transparency and verification. And I would also add a fourth dimension, which would be markets, working with consumers so that consumers are informed, and this would be a way of fighting against greenwashing. So that would be
Gracias,
it on my
Diego.
side. Thank you,
Efectivamente,
Diego.
importante lo que dices de
It's what you've just
revisar las
mentioned is
capacidades
really
que tiene
important
cada uno.
to review the capabilities of
Creo
each
que
sector.
por temas de tiempo
Because of
le voy a dar
time, I will give the
la
floor
palabra a
now
Silvia
to
para que
Silvia
nos cuente
so
un
that she
poquito.
can tell us
Ya
a
hemos
bit
hablado,
about,
justo Diego
we've
mencionaba
discussed,
esta
Diego
colaboración que necesita
mentioned this
haber entre
collaboration
todos,
that
¿no?
we need between
Quizás
the
Silvia, desde tu
different sectors. Maybe,
perspectiva,
Silvia,
hizo
from your
como
perspective,
un resumen.
could you
¿Qué es lo más
summarize
importante que tenemos que hacer para colaborar
what's the
juntos?
most important thing we need to do
Digamos,
to
entre estas
collaborate or to work
partes,
together
voy a decir consumidor,
between
gobierno,
consumers,
también desde las
governments,
propios,
and
las propios certificaciones, sellos y
certification
empresa
seals
para
and
que
companies
realmente
for
logremos ese
so
avance
that
que
we manage to
mencionábamos
make the
al
progress
rato.
that we were mentioning a little while ago.
Uy, creo que perdimos.
I
Ya,
think
ya estoy. Ay,
I'm
perdón.
here. I'm sorry.
Estoy con internet, con energía solar y no está mi número.
I have solar
Bueno,
powered internet and
vamos
it's
a ver.
a little bit slow today.
Si yo tuviera que resumir
If I had to
con la experiencia que hemos
summarize
tenido
the
durante estos
experience that we've
últimos
had
años
these last
trabajando
years
en sostenibilidad y con
in
productos
sustainability and with
cuya
products
declaración de valor al mercado es amigables
that
al ambiente, en el caso nuestro son
say that
productos de limpieza,
they are friendly with the environment. In
sanitización,
our
etcétera.
case, we have
Si yo tuviera que
sanitation and
resumir,
cleaning products.
hablaría
If
de
I had to
claridad
summarize this, I would
para
speak about
todos los
clarity
actores.
for all
Los
actors.
sellos,
The seals,
las certificaciones
the
tienen que ser cada vez más
certifications need to
específicas y
be
más
more
claras
specific
en
and
un
more clear
lenguaje común.
in
Por supuesto que hay base
simple
científica.
language.
Si no
Of
hay base
course, a
científica, estaríamos
scientific
hablando todos de
basis. If we don't
superstición.
have a
Pero la
scientific
forma en
basis,
cómo
it's
llegamos
not
a
worth
esa
anything. But the way
información
we
a los
reach
consumidores, a las
consumers with
empresas,
this
a las
information, the way we
instituciones,
reach
tiene
companies and
que ser cada
institutions
vez
to
más clara,
needs
más
to be
sencilla, más
clearer,
fácil de
simpler,
diseminar.
and
Esa sería
easier
una de las
to
acciones
understand.
principales.
So that would be
Y
one of
las
the main
otras es
actions, and the others would
cuidar
be
la comunicación.
to
Por supuesto
links
que
to
comunicar,
communication.
cuidar
Of
la
course,
comunicación. Si
communicating,
no hay
taking care of
detrás
communication. If we don't have
indicadores, data,
indicators,
información de
data,
base de lo que estás
and
haciendo y estás
information
diciéndole al
about what
mercado,
we're doing, and you're
no
telling the market,
comuniques. Esto
don't
lo digo para las empresas.
communicate.
Eso
I'm saying this
viene
to
para
the
atrás, viene
companies
para
because
atrás. Lo único que
this will
genera es,
go backwards. It
primero,
will
confusión,
generate
segundo,
confusion.
desconfianza y
It
tercero,
will
ya no te van a creer aunque le
eliminate
expliques.
trust.
Tiene que
And
ser un tema
so
de
it has to
claridad,
be
de
clear.
sustento
There has to be a
en estos
basis
sellos,
for
en
the
estas...
information.
yo esperaría que pasemos de las autodeclaraciones a,
I would
¿verdad?
expect for
A
us to
sellos, a
go
verificaciones,
from
etcétera, que tienen que ser totalmente
declarations to
sustentados.
verifications that
Hay
need
un
to
tercer
be
elemento
backed.
y
There's a
escuché
third
ahorita a Diego hablar de las
element, and I
pymes.
heard
Nosotros
Diego
empezamos siendo
talk
una
about
pyme
SMEs. We started in
y
as
hay
an
un tema
SME,
y es la
and there's a
uniformidad,
topic there, the
la
uniformity
integración
and the
regional en
integration at
diferentes
the
mercados.
regional
Por
level
ejemplo,
of different
empresas
markets
de la naturaleza nuestra van
with
llevando sus
um,
productos o sus servicios a otros
companies
mercados, es decir,
like
a
ours
otros
take
países,
our product
a otros
services to other
territorios.
markets, other countries, other
Esto de andar
territories,
cumpliendo en un territorio con una,
complying
en un
in one
mercado con una y
territory with
en otro
one
mercado con otra, es
condition
un
in another
tema
market with
súper
another one
complejo y
is
súper
very
caro.
complex and
Tenemos que
very
avanzar
expensive.
en
We need
integrarnos, en
to make
tener
progress
sellos.
in
Hay muchos que
integrating
nos validemos conjuntamente y aquí
ourselves
entran los otros actores que
and
nadie ha
using the
mencionado, que
same
son,
seals.
¿verdad? Los
And
procesos
there's other actors that we haven't mentioned here,
de los
which
instituciones de acreditación, de certificación, de
the
validación.
accreditation
Hay que
institutions,
integrarse para
validation.
poder
We need to
ofrecer una
integrate all of
plataforma
them
con
to
la
offer a
cual aplicar
platform
para todos, que sea reconocida en uno u
that
otro mercado.
is
Por eso es inviable. Es
usable
inviable
in
el
different
tema
markets. If
de los
not,
sellos para
it
las empresas
becomes
que
very
confían
difficult for
invirtiendo mucho
companies who are already
en
investing
empaques, en innovación de
in
producto, en
packages,
la
product
forma como
innovation, in the way
gestionamos todo el
we
ciclo de vida de su producto,
manage the
como
life
para ir
cycle
a
of the
tener que
product.
cambiar las cosas cada
And
vez que llegamos
so we cannot be
al mercado.
changing
Eso es barreras de
we
acceso a un mercado basado
changing
en
everything when we reach a
de
new
seguridad. Entonces,
market
por ahí
is
tenemos
a barrier
eh,
to trade.
que
So
avanzar y
we
rápido.
need to make progress
Y
there
un
and
tercer
quickly.
elemento
And a third
que para mí
element,
es súper
which
importante,
for me is very important,
si bien se necesita más educación,
we need more
ya
education.
los consumidores
The
y nosotros que
consumers
trabajamos
and
mucho con
us
empresas,
that we
porque
work
todas las
with
empresas
companies
tienen sus propias exigencias
have
éticas.
our own
Esto
uh,
conlleva toda
demands.
la
So
cadena de valor,
this
toda la cadena de
then
abastecimiento,
has an
incluyendo la
impact on the
distribución,
value chain, in
comercialización,
distribution,
y luego viene
commercialization,
el tema de la
and
disposición final de producto,
and
sigue
the final
moviéndose.
disposition of the product
Y
is
ese movimiento tiene que
moving, it's
ser
changing,
serio, basado
and
en
this needs to
estándares
be
que
this movement
compartimos,
needs to
que
be
sean
based on
claros, que
standards that we
sean,
share that are
no son
clear.
fáciles,
Not
esto no es
easy.
fácil,
This is not easy,
pero al menos
but
accesibles para
that
bajarlos
are
a mi
understandable
realidad y
to
para poder
bring them to
aplicarlos.
our
Es
realities and
para mí lo
to
más
use
importante
them.
en este
For
momento,
me, that's the most
no solo
important
hablando de
thing.
competencia
Not only talking
sana,
about
que nos haga mejorar a todos,
healthy competence that
sino
makes everybody
claridad,
improve
porque
their
los
products and services, but
consumidores y
also
las
clarity
empresas
for consumers
ya
and for
tienen un nivel
companies,
de exigencia distinto.
because there
En
is
mi
a
caso
level
nuestro, que empezamos hace un poquito más de 10
demand
años,
that is different.
ahora
We started
el
about
nivel
10
de
years ago.
exigencia y
Now
el acceso a
the
información y la
access to
posibilidad
information and the possibility
de
of
las plataformas de hacer llegar esa
the
información
platforms
y
of
que
sharing that
se examinen
information.
exactamente en tu proceso productivo son muchísimas.
And
Esta es la parte buena
so this is
de la comunicación, son
the good
muchas
part about
y
communication.
son variadas y son
And they're
accesibles. Así
varied and
que
they're
creo que eso
accessible.
es,
So
Lucía, lo que yo
I think that's it,
avanzaría
Lucia. That's what I
diciendo,
would say.
o sea, ya estamos tarde, el mercado lo está
We are
esperando.
late. The
Ahora
market is asking
pongámonos
for
serios y
this.
avancemos para que esto sea
So let's make
estándar
progress
lo
so
más
that we can
pronto posible.
standardize this as soon as possible.
Muchas gracias, Silvia,
Thank
efectivamente.
you, Silvia.
Bueno, muchas gracias a Diego
I
y a
would like to
Lucio
thank
ambos
Diego and
por su
Lucio too
participación.
for their
Y ahora
participation.
pues vamos a ir a
And
la siguiente
now
parte
we
que justo
will go to the next
habla un poco
part that
de lo que Silvia
speaks
nos
about
dice
what
de
Silvia
este
mentioned
único
about
sello nacional que
this
estamos promoviendo a través
regional
del sello
seal
ambiental
that we are
México.
promoting through the
Entonces,
environmental
Verónica, también
seal of
por
the
mi lado, dar las
Americas.
gracias.
So, Veronica, the
Así
floor
es,
is yours.
muchísimas gracias a
Thank
Lucía Justo
you,
por moderar este
Lucia
panel y a
Justo, for
nuestros
moderating this panel, and
panelistas
to
por
our
sus valiosos
panelists
aportes. Al
for
concluir,
their
nos
valuable
sigue. Recuerden que
contributions,
pueden
and
dejar sus
for the
preguntas en el
audience.
módulo de preguntas
You
y
can
respuestas
leave
en la
your
parte
questions in the
inferior de
Q&A
Zoom y al final
module
del
in
webinar
the
tendremos un
toolbar
espacio
in
dedicado para
Zoom, and at the
responder
end, we will
todas
have
estas
time for
consultas.
answering these
Este primer panel
different
nos da
questions.
continuidad a
This
Podemos.
first
El
panel gives us a
greenwashing no es solo un
powerful idea.
problema de
Greenwashing is
comunicación,
not only a
es un
communication
problema de
problem,
confianza,
it's a problem
competitividad y
related to
toma de
trust,
decisiones.
competitiveness, and
Frente a
decision
un
making.
problema regional,
Facing
se
a regional
necesita una
product,
respuesta
and
regional.
we
Por eso
need,
pasamos
when
a
we have a
otro
regional
participante
problem, we need
aquí
a regional
que
response.
formula la
Now
pregunta,
we have
¿cómo
the
se
second panel
respalda la
that
respuesta
will
regional?
uh,
El
talk
sello
about
ambiental de América
what the need and the
desde la
problem in the
infraestructura
region
de la calidad.
is.
En este bloque se
In
presentará el
this
sello
block, we will
ambiental de
discuss the
América
environmental
como
seal
una
of the
respuesta
Americas
regional
as
ante
a
la
regional
necesidad de
response
información ambiental
for the
creíble
need
y
of environmental
comparable.
information that
Se
is
explicará cómo
that we can
funciona
trust
el
and that is
esquema y
comparable.
abordará la
We will
importancia de
discuss how the
avanzar hacia
scheme works, and we will
mecanismos
talk about the
multilaterales
importance of
que
advancing to
fortalezcan la
multilateral mechanisms
consistencia
that will
regional de
strengthen the regional
acreditación y
consistency of
certificación.
accreditation and
Como
certification.
moderador tenemos
The
a
moderator will
Ferney
be
Chaparro
Ferney
Díaz.
Chaparro
Él es
Diaz.
secretario
He is
ejecutivo y
the
técnico de la
executive
Federación
secretary and
Interamericana de
technical secretary of
Acreditación,
IAAC,
IAAC. Es un especialista regional
and
en
he's a regional
acreditación y
specialist
evaluación de
in
la
accreditation and
conformidad. Y
conformity
en el nombre de
assessment.
CIS nos
And
acompaña
from
Nicolás
IAAC, we
Gutiérrez,
have,
técnica e
with the technical
institucional para
articulation
esta
and institutional
infraestructura de
articulation for
toda
this infrastructure
en las
of the
Américas.
whole of
Nos
the Americas,
acompaña
we
aquí
have
también para este panel
Verónica Garcia, and she's the chair of the Alliance in the Americas, and will present the seal actors, harmonization processes, and environmental criteria. We also have Maria Paola Marcico. She is from the Argentina accreditation body, and she is the actual chair of the MLA group of IAAC, and she will explain how the recognition agreements work and why they are essential for ensuring the technical consistency and accreditation linked to regional schemes in this sector. Perney, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Verónica.
Thank you,
Muchas
Verónica.
gracias,
Thank
Verónica
you,
García,
Verónica
Verónica y
Garcia
Paola,
and
por
Paola,
estar aquí
for
en este
being
panel.
here with
Y
us in
bueno,
this
es
panel.
súper interesante
And
también
it's
empezar a
very
dar respuesta
interesting
a muchas de las
to
inquietudes que nos están
answer
dejando
many of the
en la sesión
concerns
de
that
preguntas y
we
respuestas
have
algunas
in the
inquietudes. Muchas
Q&A
gracias por todas las preguntas que nos están
section. Thank you for I
realizando
would like to
y
thank you for all the questions
considero
that
que
you're
este es el
making.
momento para
And I
empezar a
think
dar
this is a
respuesta a
good
algunas de ellas.
moment
Y
for
en
answering
esta
many of
primera
them.
fase
So in
de
the
sesión
first
vamos a invitar a
phase of
Verónica
the
García, directora de la
panel,
Alianza
we will give the
Humanitaria
floor to
América,
Verónica
que nos
Garcia,
cuente más
and she
de
will
lo
tell
que
us
es
more
Sello Ambiental de
about
América,
the
que
Environmental
este
Seal of
va
the Americas,
respaldado
which
por
is
la
a
Alianza Ambiental de
scheme
América
of
y que es una
the
iniciativa
Environmental Alliance of the
internacional
Americas, and
también
it's a
que hace
regional
evaluación
response
ambiental
to
en
the
el
need
mundo
of
y
environmental
también ver
information that
cómo
we can
funciona este
trust,
esquema para
and
que todos
explain how
empecemos
this
a
scheme works
entender
so that
y
we
como venía las
all start
preguntas que nos están
understanding
dejando es, bueno, ¿cómo
it. And
hacemos
the
entonces
questions
para
that
no
and the
confundirnos
questions that we have
entre
is how do we
un
do to
tipo
not
de etiquetado y otro
confuse
tipo de
one type of
etiquetado
labeling and
y
another type of
empezar
labeling?
a ver que
So how
estas
we are going
condiciones ya
to
definidas para que el consumidor
define
realmente pueda
solutions so
tomar
that the
una decisión
consumer
informada
can
sobre su
make an
consumo.
informed
Entonces,
decision
en
about
esta primera
its
fase
consumption.
de
So
este
in that
panel,
first
invitaría
phase of
a
this panel,
Verónica a que nos
we would invite
explique cómo
Veronica to
funciona
explain
la Alianza Ambiental de
how
América en
the
este
Environmental
sentido.
Alliance of the Americas work.
Adelante, Verónica.
The floor
Muchísimas
is yours,
gracias,
Veronica.
Ferney.
Thank you,
Muchísimas gracias a
Verne.
todos por estar
Thank you,
aquí.
everybody, for
El
being
panel
here.
anterior creo que
And
nos
the
abre toda
previous panel
la visión de los
opens
problemas que
the vision of
estamos
the
enfrentando,
issues
pero
that we
no
are
es
facing.
actual. Esto tiene
But
ya muchos años.
it's
Nosotros
not recent.
empezamos a
This has been on the go
trabajar
for many years.
en
We
crear la Alianza
started
Ambiental de América
working
como esta
on creating the
organización que
alliance
alberga
as the
principalmente la
organization that
inversión
hosts the
ambiental
first
desde hace más de 10 años, cuando
eco
Costa Rica se dio
labeling
cuenta
program.
que el mundo
When
estaba
Costa Rica
girando hacia
realized that
este tema
the
y que
world was turning
necesitábamos
around this
unirnos como
topic and
región
that we needed to
para
unite
poder
ourselves as a
enfrentar
region
los
to
temas que nos
face
acaban de
the
comentar y poderle dar al
topics
consumidor
that have just
justamente
been commented
una
and
opción
give the
que
consumer
les
an
dé
option
credibilidad.
that
Entonces,
will give them,
el primer eje es
provide them information
empezamos
with
ya desde hace
credibility.
tiempo,
So
pero al día de hoy ya tenemos
today
11
we have
miembros de
11
organismos reguladores de
members from
normalización y de
regulating bodies
acreditación
and
procedentes
standardization and
dentro de la
accreditation bodies
región de
from
América
6
Latina y
different
el Caribe,
countries in
que
the region,
representan
Latin America and the Caribbean, that
450
represent more than
millones de consumidores
450
potenciales. Esto en
million
primer
potential
lugar
consumers.
ha hecho
This, in the first
mucho, les
place,
ha dado mucho interés a la
has
industria porque pues
given a great
vamos a
deal of
poder
interest to the
llegar con
industry
una
because
sola
we have
información a muchos consumidores.
we will be able to
Afortunadamente,
reach many
pues ya
consumers
Ecuador,
with the
Costa
same
Rica y
information.
Colombia han emitido
Fortunately,
el esquema de
Ecuador, Costa Rica, and
acreditación del
Colombia
Sello
have
Ambiental de
issued
América
the
con la
scheme
finalidad de empezar a dar
with
también
the
credibilidad a
purpose of
todo el esquema.
providing credibility
Tenemos actualmente
to
7
the scheme. We
categorías de
have
criterios ya elaborados que
7
ahora les vamos a
categories of
comentar y
criteria
ya
that we have
tenemos
regulated,
empresas
and we will comment on
interesadas
those. And
en
we have
empezar
companies
ya a
that are interested
certificar. Entonces ya
in
ahorita estamos
certifying
justamente
themselves.
en esta
So we
transición
are in
hacia la
this transition phase
implementación de todo
towards
lo
the
que hemos venido
implementation of
consolidando
everything that we have been
para que el
building
mercado
so
pueda
that the
adoptar esto y
markets can
podamos
adopt
hacer una transición
this and so
adecuada.
that we can carry out
¿Quiénes
a
son
correct
miembros y
transition.
partes interesadas en
Who
esta
are
alianza?
members
Los
and
miembros
stakeholders in the
tenemos
alliance?
la
Members We have governments, the metrology institutes, standardization bodies, accreditation bodies, certification organizations, and companies, of course, because we need this network that connects all these elements and this policy for consumers and markets with credibility. At this point in time, in this platform that we're already operating, we have, fortunately, governments from Ecuador that is already on board as a member of the alliance. We have the government of Costa Rica, the government of Colombia, and the one from Panama too, and the Peruvian government in the last analysis before becoming members of the alliance. We have the standardization entities. They are fundamental pieces because they help us develop the sustainability criteria. We have the accreditors that provide us the trust, and you can see who's there. And in the metrology institutes, we already have the INM from Colombia. So we've been working on this for 13 years, and we've been strengthening it and working on it, as you can see, with the quality infrastructure of each country. As a strategic partner, we have IAAC and ISO because we comply with all international standards in the topics that are required, and SIM and COPANT, who are observers at this point in time. What characteristics does the alliance have? We were talking about the seal. So you will find this in the products, and this is the main tool for sharing with the consumers that the products that has the seal does have a better environmental performance in the products where it's in the market, and also the footprints. These are more the information to know the environmental impacts during the life cycle, but the total amount of impacts. This has to do with this is more business to business information so that they can choose the best option for the development of their activities. The structure that we see here is a very simple structure where all members have an assembly. We have a directive council with a balance of interests so that the best decisions are made. And we have committees of operation, which is where we formulate the policies, procedures, and criteria for sustainability. And of course, we have a strategic committee that allows us to improve and reach the objectives that we have proposed. How do we develop these sustainability criteria of the alliance? Any of the members can propose a product because of a priority that they have in their country, maybe because it's causing a problem of credibility, or that there's an environmental relevance, something that's relevant environmentally that needs to be solved. So this is presented to the Directive Council. So it's presented with an analysis to know which are the significant impacts considering the life cycle approach. Lucia was saying it's very important not to transport environmental impacts from one side to another. Today we have circular economy, and that's great. But if we only recycle without analyzing the environmental impacts that we have with water, soil, the environment, without carrying out that analysis, we are hardly going to have a real success in sustainability and in supporting this crisis that we have at the planet level. So we carry out this analysis, we analyze the feasibility of evaluating any requirement that is set for the product, because if not, it's useless. And the country that submits this, that country starts leading the developing process, inviting experts of all the standardization bodies that have their own national committees These committees appoint experts, and among those experts, or between those experts, the sustainability criteria and the requirements are built from the environmental and social point of view that need to be measured to confirm that the product has a better environmental performance. We do a public consultation to all regional actors, but also it's also open for the public so that persons like Acatu, entities like Acatu or consumers can provide their opinion, and we publish these criteria. Everything has a scientific and methodological basis, as Silvia was mentioning, where we do need to have a great deal of clarity about the specifications that we need to show and the technical evidence that we are going to use for backing the compliance the statements. And this is done with the stakeholders, but also with the conformity assessment bodies. The Alliance, the Environmental Alliance of the Americas, has credibility on the conformity assessment bodies. At this point in time, we have seven criteria for sustainability that have been developed. We have coffee, paint, paper, and cleaning products. We are about to issue next month the one for air conditionings and cooling equipment and recycled plastic. And the sustainability criteria are very important. For example, we will discuss climate change, and we know that carbon that is issued in the environment is a problem. In refrigerators and AC, we talk about energy efficiency because there are regulations that we already have in countries, but we need to think about the type of product that they use, refrigerant products that these products use, because these can pollute, and we want to avoid this. So the sustainability criteria implicates all the significant impacts that the product should have. And once they prove that they comply with all these specifications, at that point, the certification body that has been accredited by a body that is a member of the IAAC, they can start including the seal in their products. I will leave it there in order to continue with the next topic. Thank you, Veronica. Now we will give the floor to Paola to start discussing about the alliance that we have on one side and the seal as a concept for solving some issues associated to eco-labeling in the continent. And on the other hand, we have IAC, led by Paola and the Agreement Committee. And this is how a potential interaction will function, or joint work between what the Alliance does and the IAC does. And we will give the floor now to Paola. She is the chair of the committee, of the MLAC committee in IAC. Thank you, Ferney. Thank you, Vero. It's a pleasure to be here with you today working on this topic. And as Veronica said, we've been discussing this for many years. And for IAC, it's a pleasure to be able to collaborate in the promotion of these eco labels. And we will start working and landing this. And for the persons who don't have a complete idea of what, say, IAC does, their function, we are the Inter-American Cooperation of Accreditation Bodies. So when we speak about international recognition, today managed by Global ACI, that's the International Cooperation for Accreditation Bodies. And today they are in charge, replacing ILAC and IAF. Let's remember that international recognitions are managed by the regions. So IAC manages those international recognition that have the support of global ACI as the international cooperation for accreditation bodies. In this context, we will be talking about a project that we are managing in IAAC and how we will be embracing and working with these labels. We discussed greenwashing labels, the impact on the market. Veronica spoke about the alliance, how they're working, what the objective of their alliance is. And now I'd like to tell you about the role that from IAC and as the chair of the Committee for International Agreements. So we think that IAC plays a fundamental role as a guardian of trust. We talk about trust, we talk about labels and how this reaches the market. So we would like to work on this. We feel close to this topic because accreditation bodies are guarantors or fundamental members of each one of the labels and that are expressed in the products and that has an accreditation behind it. So what does being accredited mean? And what does having an accreditation with international backup mean? So IAC carries out the peer evaluations to the accreditation body to then provide these international recognition or acknowledgements. These evaluations are done for declaring the compliance with the standard, which is 17011, and the accreditation bodies evaluate the conformity assessment bodies so that they certify, inspect, test, and validate these environmental statements. And with all this support, uh, product and statement will reach the market with evidence for generating trust. And so we need to think what there is behind, what we have behind each one of these labels. Governments, companies, and consumers somehow are the ones that form the synergy, and us as entities for conformity assessment, we comply or try to strengthen that wish of support, of transparency, of trust. So next slide, please. So we will discuss and we will see how we will develop this recognition that implicates accreditations that have been given in equivalent conditions of competition, impartiality, transparency. So we will look for these schemes. For us, the word scheme is a word that we use very frequently. That's where we have the documents that establish the requirements that each one of the products need to comply with. So they need to, we're looking for common criteria so that they could be acknowledged, and we're finding harmonization in these criteria. And so that peer evaluations can be done under this criteria harmonization process. And the objective, and you will find it in many presentations done by IAC and their slogan. So the objective of the MLA is to reduce the amount of evaluations and strengthen the results that we can trust in our countries. So it's a priority to start working on the acceptance of conformity assessment schemes within the cooperation. On the other hand, since we live in a globalized world and we belong to, and we are acknowledged as a region by global for managing these processes that are backed by global ACI, we have the experience of evaluating certification schemes, evaluating validation and verification schemes, to say this scheme can be worked on under accreditation. And also within Global, we have the experience of evaluating schemes so that they are standardized, so that they are acknowledged or recognized internationally. So I think it's a time to listen to the needs of the region of the Americas to be able to work jointly. And we started thinking on which is the objective of IAC. So how us as the cooperation, we can collaborate with this synergy, understanding that there is a need in the market. So what we can do is when we have an accreditation, when there's an international recognition, when we have a fake certification that gets diluted. So giving a scientific dimension to these recognitions, this changes the situation. Today, we need to collaborate with the development of, with a guarantee of complete impartiality in the activities that's created that statement and what is being issued, what is being backed. And avoid what we can, for a company to look to have different seals and different regions and different countries, and this will generate confusion in the market. Besides, instead of providing clarity. Next slide, please. So we will talk about which are the regional schemes for recognition. We have a route that we are going to share with you and that we've started using because we have experience and knowledge on evaluation schemes for conformity assessment. So we need to define the scheme, the objective, the scope, the criteria, the rules and governance regarding these requirements. Then identify which is the accreditation standard that applies to each one of the schemes, 17029, 17065. What am I going to work on? Analyze the technical competence that is required and the consistency that is required so that that scheme is can be worked on under a recognition agreement in IAC. Also, train, harmonize, and execute pilot plans and establish a formal mechanism for these activities. So acknowledging a certification scheme and validation and verification scheme is not acknowledging a logo or a brand. It's evaluating and ensuring technical competence and consistency and transparency that is given by that mark or that scheme. So it's a lot more than just accepting a logo or a brand or a mark. We will require the cooperation and joint work of each one of the actors of the alliance, of IAC, of the accreditation bodies, of the certification bodies, and especially from the governments, companies, and consumers in order to identify which the needs are. They will mark the future, the objective, and we will support them with our capability and consistency. Next slide, please. So we will have to sit down and work and discuss which is the proposal and working route and develop a regional seal in a regional infrastructure for trust, which will be the phases, the discussion, technical analysis, harmonization, and pilot plans for being able to position these schemes within a superior level of trust, transparency, and competition or competence, technical competence.
Gracias, Paola.
Thank
En esta
you,
primera fase como
Paola.
de contexto, le
In
voy a
this
llamar ahora
first
como para entender
phase of
cuál es el
context, let's
rol
call
de
it
la
like that,
Alianza Ambiental
to
de América, cuáles
understand
son los
the
roles
roles
de
of the
Relive
Alliance, the roles of
y entendido los
IAAC,
roles de cada uno,
and the
una
roles
pregunta
of
para Verónica.
each
Verónica, esto suena muy complejo,
one
porque,
of
bueno,
us. A
primero
question for
está la
Veronica.
parte donde,
First, we
la
have
Alianza Ambiental de América
the part
simplemente
where
hubiese
the
podido decir,
Environmental Alliance of
vamos a
the
hacer
Americas
un
could have
excelente
said we are going
marketing,
to do an excellent
posicionamos la
marketing,
marca
we will
de
position
sello ambiental de
we will
América
brand
y
the
entraríamos
seal
en un mercado
and
normal
the
donde
environmental seal, and we
tendríamos
will
nuestra
reach
etiqueta
a
base.
normal
Estaríamos en una
market where
ruta
it will
donde,
be an
como lo
extra eco
presentaba
label.
Paola, hay
But
evaluaciones,
there
escoger
is a
normas,
route with
está vinculado al
evaluation
Instituto de
standards, it's
Metrología,
linked to
veíamos preguntas,
metrology,
otros institutos de
there
metrología
are
estaban diciendo, bueno, ¿yo
questions.
cómo me vinculo?
And I
Bueno,
was looking at the
estás
questions other
vinculando
NMIs were saying,
a
how do
otros
I
actores en este proceso
link
y
myself to the
que
process?
hubiesen podido ser ustedes solos
So
como un
it could have
esquema
been
donde
only
todos
you
se
developing a
establecieran
scheme
una marca y se pudiese
for
generar
a
esa credibilidad
branding
y todo
scheme,
este respaldo y toda esta información que estaban hablando,
and
que estaba
but you
mencionando
included all
Paola.
this
Y por otro
information,
lado,
and
también dentro de las preguntas decían, bueno,
and in the
pero todos los
questions
países
we
tienen
also have all
regulaciones, tienen
countries have
mucha información.
regulations, have a
¿Ustedes
great deal of
cómo van a
information.
asegurar que
How
eso
are
se
you
va a
going to
poder
ensure that that will
trabajar de manera
be
conjunta?
worked
Eso
on
por ahí
jointly?
inicialmente lo
So
veo muy complejo
initially,
y la pregunta es, ¿por qué quieren entrar en esos procesos
I
de
think it's complex.
reconocimiento
So the
como
question is,
Alianza
why do you want
Ambiental
to
de
go
América?
into these recognition processes as an alliance?
El micrófono está cerrado.
Your
Está
microphone
cerrado
is
el
muted.
micrófono, Verónica.
Gracias, gracias Ferney y gracias
Thank
Paola por habernos hecho
you,
toda la
Ferney, and
ruta
thank you,
de
Paola,
cómo vamos a
for
detener el
drawing
cáncer.
the route on what we
Justamente
need to do.
porque lo que estamos buscando
What we're
con el
looking
sello ambiental de
for with
América es
the
una
seal
sostenibilidad
is
verificable en todas sus
sustainability that's
dimensiones.
verifiable
Es que
in
nosotros
all its
dijimos,
dimensions.
tenemos que
That's why
tener
we said we
evidencia.
need
Primero que
to
nada,
have
es la
first.
primera vez en que
It's the
vamos a
first
tener un
time that we will
criterio
have
ambiental
an
para
environmental
toda la región,
criteria
una
for
especificación
the
para un
whole region,
producto
a
que pueda ser aplicado a
specification
toda la
for a
región. No
product that can
tenemos en la
be
región
applied in the
ibérica
whole region. We don't have in the
norma,
Americas,
una
in our region,
especificación
a
que sea
standard or a
idéntica en todos lados.
specification that it's the
Entonces, lo
same
que
in all
nosotros
countries.
hicimos fue
So what we did
precisamente
was
buscar
precisely
tener todo el esquema completo,
to
toda la
have
infraestructura
the
de la
whole
calidad con
scheme,
nosotros,
the whole
con
quality
todo lo que nos
infrastructure,
acaba de decir
with
Paola,
everything that
con
Paola
la
mentioned, with
venia de Global ACI como sombrilla de todo el esquema,
and global
todo el
ACI
reconocimiento que se
as
quiere
an
hacer a
umbrella
nivel
for
internacional a través de
these
Relive,
organizations, also
con
with the
el
recognition that
reconocimiento de los
IAAC
organismos de
has, with the
acreditación a través
recognition
de
of the
IAC,
accreditation bodies
con
through
el reconocimiento
IAAC,
de la
with the
competencia de
recognition
los
of
organismos de
competence of the
certificación y de
certification
validación
bodies and
verificación
validation and verification bodies,
dentro de este esquema para que las empresas
so
puedan
that
estar
companies
confiadas y seguras de
can
que así es.
trust and be
Hemos estado
sure about the
trabajando en
information that is
todos
provided to them.
los temas
We've
que
been
quiere decir
working on all
norma
topics
para realizar
in
criterios conjuntos. Se
17011 to
hizo
harmonize
todo el
criteria.
análisis de
We
idoneidad
did
del
the whole
esquema
analysis
conjuntamente con los acreditadores miembros
for
de
the
nuestra
scheme
región.
together with the accreditors,
Tenemos
members of the alliance.
ahora hicimos una
We
capacitación a evaluadores, auditores,
made a
expertos
training for
técnicos
evaluating
para que
auditors,
todos
experts,
apliquen
technicians, so that they
exactamente de
all
la misma manera el
use
esquema. Hicimos hasta
the
una
scheme in the
matriz de
same way. We
riesgo
also did a
de
risk
cómo el organismo de
matrix
acreditación va a
on
evaluar y
how
los
the
miembros lo quieren acreditar
accreditation
para que todos lo apliquen
body would
igual.
evaluate risk so that
Cada
everybody
criterio de
applies it
sostenibilidad
the
tiene una
same.
matriz de
Each
certificación
sustainability
en donde
criterion
viene
has a
exactamente
matrix
qué
which
tengo que
has
pedir
what
en
exactly
la
we need to
auditoría,
ask
qué
in
voy a
the
ver, en
audit
dónde voy a pedir
process,
un ensayo de un
where we're
laboratorio
going to
tal, en
ask for
dónde
a
puedo ver
test, where
solamente
we
evaluación
can look at
documental,
only
con la
document
finalidad
evaluations,
de
with
que
the
todo
purpose
el
of
esquema
so that
realmente
the
sea aplicado de
whole
la misma manera a
scheme
nivel
is
nacional.
applied in the same way at
Entonces,
the regional
estamos
level.
construyendo un
So
ecosistema
we are
regional
building
de
a
normas
regional
ambientales.
ecosystem
Es
of
algo nuevo porque antes
environmental
todas las
standards. And this
estructuras de
is something
calidad
new
se
because all
consideraban
the
para
quality
calidad,
infrastructure was
para
considered
seguridad,
for quality, for
para vías de
security,
comunicación,
for
pero nadie
communication,
se
but
había pensado que también
we
se
hadn't
requería toda
thought on requiring
para temas
the
ambientales. Hoy
quality
en día
infrastructure for environmental
estamos,
topics
ya
today.
desde hace algunos años,
Fortunately, for some
empezamos a
years now, we
trabajar en
started
esto.
working
Entonces,
on this
nosotros,
area.
nuestros criterios
So us
armonizados con
with
la
our harmonized
certificación
criteria, with
actualizada,
the
con
accredited
criterios técnicos
certification, with technical
reales, donde el
criteria
acuerdo de
that is
reconocimiento
real,
del
with
MLA
the
y con el sistema etiquetario
recognition
muy
agreement from the
importante
MLA, and with
reconocido
the
por el
labeling
organismo
system that is acknowledged
mundial
by the
de ecoetiquetas, que
World
es el Global
Eco-Labeling
Ecosystem Network,
Body
que asegura que
or network,
los programas de ecoetiquetado están
which ensures
cumpliendo
that
con
the
las normas
labeling
y
programs are
señalización
complying
importante.
with ISO
Nosotros y
14024.
nuestros miembros, por supuesto,
And
cuando ya
our
hablo de nosotros,
members,
hablo de todos los que
when
estamos
I say
dentro,
us, I speak
estamos
about
ya
everybody.
implementando a nivel
We are
nacional, regional, Ecuador, Colombia,
implementing
Costa
at the
Rica,
regional
ya
level. Ecuador,
lanzaron
Colombia, and Costa Rica have already
el tema
launched
de
their
sello ambiental de América. Ya están
scheme,
empresas, como les decía, en fase de análisis
environmental
para
steel scheme from the
certificación.
Americas. We have
Perú,
the
por
analysis of
Sudamérica, va a ser el
certification, and
lanzamiento
Peru
muy próximamente
will
y
probably launch
queremos
it soon.
irnos hacia el
And we
retail con
will,
la finalidad número uno de que los consumidores
with the
tengan
purpose
una
so that the
sola
consumers have
posibilidad de
one
entender que este sello
the
sí tiene
possibility of understanding
credibilidad.
that this
Número
seal
dos,
does
que
have
nos permita
credibility
hacer
to
también
that it will
reconocimientos
allow us to do recognitions
internacionales
at
en
the
los distintos
international level
programas de
with the
ecoetiquetado
different
que ya nos están
eco-labeling programs that are
pidiendo
already
a
asking
varios productos, que haya una
for many
expansión a
products,
nuevos países dentro de la
an
misma región,
expansion
que tengamos más
of the countries in the
criterios
region to have
de
more
sostenibilidad y que
sustainability
tengamos ese
criteria,
fortalecimiento y
and to have
reconocimiento del mercado para
the
consolidarlo.
recognition
Entonces,
of the market
esta
to
cuestión de
consolidate
gestión
ourselves.
de la infraestructura
So
común va a estar siempre respaldada, o
this is going
buscamos
to
que esté
be
siempre respaldada por IAC,
always backed
porque
by
nos da la confianza
IAAC
técnica,
because
porque
it
hay un
gives us
reconocimiento
technical
regional y porque estamos
trust
seguros que va a
and
ser siguiente
recognition,
por
and because we are
consistencia
sure that
operativa.
we will have
Entonces,
this
les
operative
invitamos,
consistency.
aprovechamos
So
para
we would like
invitarle
to
a
invite
todos los países
you
del
and
continente,
invite all
no
countries in
solo a
the
sumarse a la
continent, not
alianza,
only
sino
to
realmente a
join the
apoyarnos
alliance,
en
but also
liderar
to
una
support us
nueva forma de
lead a
producir,
new way of
certificar y consumir con
uh,
confianza
producing,
ambiental en
certifying,
América.
and
Y eso
consuming
lo que va a
with
hacer
trust
es
in the
que a través de
Americas.
este
And
acuerdo de
what
IAC y
this will do
Alianza
is that
Comercial de
through this
América
agreement
logremos
between
dar
the
a
alliance and
reconocer al
IAC,
mundo entero
we will
que
be
el
able to show
esquema
the
de
world
la
that the
región es
scheme
justo.
of the region
¿Sí?
can be
Muchas
trusted.
gracias.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias,
Thank
Verónica.
you, Verónica.
Bueno, aquí tengo una pregunta. Sí, ya apareció
Yes,
mi susto, que es Verónica
we
Ruano.
have
Hablaré
Verónica
todo mi
Ruano
saludo
on the
para todos
screen.
los
When
que
she
estén
shows up on the
conectados en este
screen,
webinar. Es porque el tiempo
it's
se nos
because
está
the
agotando y
time we're running
la
out of
pregunta es,
time. So the
¿alcanzo a hacer una
question is,
pregunta adicional
can
a
I
Paola
make an
o aquí
additional
ya
question
terminamos?
to Paola, or should we close?
Que sea la pregunta y que sea la respuesta concreta, por favor, para poder finalizar.
So yes, the specific
Perfecto,
question and
Paola. Veo
specific
que
answer.
Responder rapidito.
So I
Bueno,
need to answer
perfecto,
quickly.
Paola. Sí, porque
Perfect.
acá creo que es muy importante para
It's
todos
very important
saber
for everybody
exactamente
to
cómo
know
funciona, pues,
how
lo más
exactly
sintetizado posible, cómo funciona un acuerdo de reconocimiento de acuerdo con lo que acabo de
recognition
expresar.
agreements
Verónica, en esta
works.
gráfica
So
global,
Veronica, in
IAC,
this
acreditador,
slide,
certificador
global
y otros.
AAC
¿Qué es lo
certification
que hace
consumer.
exactamente
So
IAC
what
cuando
does
se habla de un acuerdo de
IAC does when
reconocimiento?
we speak about recognition
Bueno,
agreement?
y hace cuando se habla de un acuerdo de
IAC, when we
reconocimiento
speak
dentro
about this type of
detrás
agreement within
de ese certificado hay un
this
reconocimiento
certificate,
internacional
there's an
con el permiso de
international
utilizar una definición,
recognition
una
with
declaración de que ese certificado tiene
the
un
authorization
nombre
of
y un
using
reconocimiento
a
internacional.
label.
Para el caso de un esquema,
So
como
with
dijo
for the case of a
Verónica,
scheme, as Veronica said,
va a tener que
IAC will
desarrollar una
have to
documentación
develop
y unos criterios
documents and
específicos
specific
para
criteria
reconocer el
for
primer esquema
acknowledging or
de
the
acreditación de
first
América,
scheme
reconocido
for
por una
accreditation of the Americas
organización
that is
internacional. Es
recognized
decir,
by
que
an
vamos a
international
estar
cooperation. So we will
trabajando
be
en
working
conjunto con todos los
together
miembros de IAC, los
with all the IAC
organizaciones
members, the accreditation
autorizadas y
bodies,
certificadoras,
stakeholders,
desarrollando todos estos documentos
developing these
y esta
documents
estructura
and
para
this
lograr
structure
brindar
for
al mercado la
managing to
posibilidad
provide
del
to the market the
trabajo de esquemas de
possibility
certificación
of
unificados a nivel de la
having
cooperación. Detrás de cada
certification
uno de
schemes
ellos, detrás
unified
de
through
cada uno de esos
cooperation.
acuerdos,
Behind
detrás de
each one
cada
of these
uno de
agreements
esas
and
evaluaciones a las
each of
cuales
these
se
evaluations
somete este
where
organismo de
we
acreditación para poder brindar reconocimiento,
have
competencia
these
jurídica
schemes to provide technical competition, impartiality, transparency to generate trust.
Muchas gracias, Paola. Y
Thank you,
Verónica
Paola
Ruano,
and
Muy
Veronica.
bien,
adelante.
muchísimas
Gracias,
gracias,
Very
Verne, por
well.
moderar
I would
este
like to thank
segundo
Ferne
panel
for
y
moderating
también a
this
Verónica
second panel,
García,
and also
Paola Márcico
Veronica
por
Garcia,
mostrarnos
Paola
cómo esta
Marcico
cultura de
for
la
showing
calidad
us
puede convertir una aspiración
uh,
regional en un mecanismo
how
confiable para el
we
mercado.
can build
Recordamos a nuestra audiencia
mechanism that we can trust for the market.
que
I would
todas
like
sus
to
inquietudes y
remind the
consultas las
audience that
hemos
your
estado tratando
questions and
de ya responder
concerns
por interno
uh,
por temas de
are
tiempo.
being
Les indicamos
answered in written, and
que
because of time,
serán respondidas a través de
they
los
will
datos que ya hemos
be
manejado.
answered
Y
through
llegamos al cierre de este
the
webinar
emails that you
regional.
provided
Y para
us.
las
We
palabras
have
finales
reached the end of
invitamos
this
a
webinar, and for the
a
final
Daniel
words,
Trillos,
we will
presidente de
have
la
Daniel
Alianza
Trillos,
Ambiental
Chair
de
of
América.
the Environmental
Por
Alliance of
favor,
the
adelante,
Americas.
Daniel.
The floor is yours, Daniel.
Hola, Verónica. Perdón, un segundo, estoy tratando de abrir la
Hello,
cámara.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to open my
Adelante.
camera. Ready.
Vale, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you.
A todos, muchísimas
I
gracias.
would like
Quiero
to thank
expresar
everybody. I would like
mi
to
más sincero
express
agradecimiento
I would
a
like
la
to
Cooperación
thank you or
Interamericana
thank
de Acreditación,
the
IAAC,
IAAC,
al PTB, al Programa de
PTB,
Naciones Unidas para el Medio Ambiente,
and the
que a
United
través de
Nations
Ecoadvance
Program
ha
for the
apoyado todo el
Environment,
proyecto que se está
and
desarrollando dentro de
the
la alianza.
support that they've
Por supuesto, a los
given to the
panelistas, a los
Alliance, and also the
moderadores y a todos
panelists, the
quienes participaron y
moderators,
quienes nos
and all
acompañaron hoy.
participants who were
Considero que
here with
este
us today.
espacio nos
I think that
mostró
this space
el valor de
showed
reunir
us
diferentes
the value
perspectivas
of
para reflexionar
joining different
sobre ese
perspectives
desafío
to
común que tenemos
discuss
ahora,
that
y es cómo
challenge that we all
asegurar
have
que la
now, which
información
is how do we
ambiental
ensure
que
that
está en los mercados
environmental
sea
information
confiable,
that's in the
sea
markets is
verificable
we
y
can
sea
trust
útil
and
para
it's
la toma de
verifiable and
decisiones.
that it's
Algo
useful for decision
importante que
making.
debemos llevarnos de
Something
esta
that's
conversación
important
es
that we
que
should take
la
from this
sostenibilidad
conversation is that
requiere confianza
sustainability
y esa
requires
confianza
trust, and that
requiere
trust
información clara,
requires clear
transparente
information,
y que esté
transparent
respaldada
information,
técnicamente.
and that is
Sin esa
backed
información
technically.
confiable, es
Without
realmente difícil
that
o
information, it's
imposible poder orientar
difficult or
adecuadamente las
impossible to
políticas
orient
públicas,
correctly the
poder
public
tomar
policies,
decisiones
also
empresariales,
to
poder
make
tomar las
company
elecciones de consumo
decisions to
que
select
realmente puedan
the
contribuir a un
products
desarrollo
that
más
could
sostenible y a una
contribute to
mejora
a more
de las
sustainable
características y
development.
condiciones ambientales en las que estamos viviendo. También en los paneles vimos
In
que
the
pues, el greenwashing no es un
panels,
problema de
we saw that
comunicación solamente
greenwashing
o de
is not a
mercadeo,
communication problem or a
realmente eso
marketing problem.
puede
It's something
distorsionar
that
las
can
decisiones, generar
distort
confusión,
decisions and
afectar
generate
la competencia leal
confusion and
y
affect loyal
debilitar la
competition
confianza
and
de los
weaken
consumidores, de los
trust of
mercados y en
consumers,
general de todos
markets,
en los
and
esfuerzos por la
everybody's
sostenibilidad.
trust in general for
También una de
sustainability
las
efforts.
conclusiones quizá más
One of
importantes de
the
estos
important
paneles es
conclusions
que
of these panels is
ninguno
that
puede actuar
no
ni resolver estos
nobody can
retos de
act
forma
or
aislada.
solve these
Realmente se
challenges in
requieren
an
sinergias.
isolated manner. We
Los
need
gobiernos, por
synergies.
supuesto, tienen un papel
Governments
fundamental
have
en
a
esa definición
fundamental
de los
role
marcos
in the
regulatorios de las
definition of
políticas públicas.
regulatory
Las
frameworks and
empresas tienen la
public policies.
responsabilidad de
Companies have
implementar
the responsibility
prácticas
of
que sean
implementing
transparentes,
practices that
que
are
sean
transparent
ajustadas y
and that
responsaves
are
a las
adjusted and
necesidades que
responsible of the
enfrentamos y a los retos que
needs
estamos
that we
enfrentando.
face
Por
and the
supuesto, los
challenges that we
consumidores
face. And of
también
course,
tienen
consumers
el
have
reto de demandar
the
información
challenge of
confiable y nosotros como organizaciones de
requiring
la
information
infraestructura
they
de la
can trust, and
calidad
us
tenemos que
as
generar esas
quality
herramientas que
infrastructure
permitan
bodies, we
respaldar
need to generate the
técnicamente
tools that
la
can back
confianza que se
technically
requiere.
the trust
Si
that
bien
is
son
required.
responsabilidades distintas,
They are
son
different
totalmente complementarias.
responsibilities,
Por
but
eso cada vez es más
they
necesario
complement
que
each
las
other.
declaraciones
So it's
ambientales evolucionen
necessary
desde
for the
afirmaciones
environmental
generales a
statements to
una
evolve
información
from
sustentada
general
con criterios sólidos, que sea
statements
objetiva,
to
que sea transparente y que
objective
pueda tener una
statements that are
verificación
transparent
independiente.
and that are
Solo con esto
verifiable
realmente vamos a poder
independently.
diferenciar
Only
esas
with that we will
iniciativas
be able
genuinas de
to
sostenibilidad
differentiate
de aquellas
genuine
que no tienen
initiatives
ese
for
respaldo
sustainability
suficiente
from the
para
ones that
generar la
don't have
confianza. Y es
enough
justamente
backup
en
for
este
generating
contexto
trust. So it's
donde
in this
cobra
context
gran relevancia la
where
Alianza Ambiental
the
de América y
alliance has
específicamente el
a great
Sello Ambiental de
relevance
América.
and the
Realmente esta
seal
iniciativa
for the
surge
Americas.
como
This
esa respuesta
initiative
regional para
is
poder
a
ofrecer
regional
información
response for
ambiental
offering
creíble,
environmental
comparable y
information that we can
confiable
trust, that is
sobre los diferentes
comparable
productos y servicios que
about the
llegan al
different
mercado.
products and services
La
that we have in
fortaleza
the
de este
market. The
sello
strength
no
of this
solamente es el sello
seal
para el
is
consumidor.
not only
El
visible for the
verdadero valor está en
consumer,
todo
the
ese
real
sistema que lo
value is in
respalda.
the whole system that backs it, the environmental criteria that are harmonized. We will have a harmonized environmental criteria in the region for the first time. We will have these and mechanisms that are robust for accreditation and schemes for certification that are competent and independent, so that we can transform that environmental statement as a positive signal for the market. We need to continue making more progress in harmonization and regional acknowledgement, so that the certification that is developed and delivered for the products has the same level of trust regardless of the country or the organization that issued it. That trust should be stopped in borders, and that's why we're working on a regional scheme, so that it goes with the products to the companies and consumers of the whole region. So in that sense, the work that we are doing between the Alliance and IAAC is a very important step for strengthening the consistency of accreditation, for widening the acknowledgement among countries, and consolidating trust in the certifications that are associated to the Americas seal. However, the challenge that we have is very clear. We need to go from building the system to an effective implementation and its use in the market. We need to incorporate more countries. We need to incorporate more conformity assessment bodies. We need to incorporate more companies and more productive sectors that look at these mechanisms and see a tool that will generate trust. So I would like to finish with an invitation for everybody who is in this meeting: governments, standardization bodies, accreditation bodies, metrology institutes, certificators, companies, and consumer organizations, that we continue working together for strengthening and using these regional mechanisms. Sustainability requires credibility. Credibility is built through solid institutions with regional cooperation and with trust that is backed with evidence. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, for your support, your contributions, your commitment with sustainability. It's not only trying to transform markets, but also generate a necessary trust to do everything we need. Thank you very much. We would like to thank Daniel Trios for his conclusion words. He included the main messages of today's webinar, and he answered some of the questions that we saw from the participants with his intervention. We would like to thank Warren Merkel, Vice Chair of IAAC, who was here with us. And in your screens, you have the QR code for evaluating this event. It's important for us to receive your feedback and opinions regarding this activity, because this allows us to improve our activities. And we would like to say an invitation to each environmental statement can be backed, and each decision of purchase, public policy, or company strategy finds in quality infrastructure a source of real trust. Thank you very much for being here with us. Please have a nice rest of the day.